So, in social psychology, we need to think about how we relate to other people and how they relate to us, and how we are affected by others and how we affect them. So, the first thing we need to think about when talking about others is how we think about others and why we think that. So, there's something called the Attribution Theory. And this is the idea that when we're talking about other people, we typically attribute their behavior, meaning we try to explain their behavior in one of two ways. We either say, well, that's just their personality, or we say, well, that's just because of the situation that they're in. So we either attribute their behavior by their personality, we're also going to call that internal dispositions, or the external situations that they're in. So if you were to see someone in class, you typically are like, oh, well, they're like this and that and the other, and you'll give characteristics talking about their personality. They're shy, or they're talkative, or they're smart, or they're outgoing, something like that. And so that's typically a personality characteristics. Those are the internal dispositions. Sometimes you have to focus on the external situations as well, like, they're always busy, or they seem to be stressed about other things, or they are really in a good mood because this is happening. So both of those are in play. So here's an example between Jack and Julie. And we all know people like Jack and Julie. Jack and Julie are both in your AP psychology class, and Jack is a cut-up. He is loud and he's always has something to say, always has some little anecdote to share, and typically the class clown. Julie, on the other hand, she's a little quiet, a little reserved, quite shy. And you typically would just say, well, that's just the way Jack and Julie are. Jack's internal disposition, his personality is he's a extrovert. He's a class clown. He's a cut up. And Julie, she's an introvert. She's shy and she's just quiet and reserved. Well, that's a problem that we make, is that when we attribute people's behavior to either their internal disposition or their external situation, we tend to not put those in the same, we don't typically put the same weight on those. Typically, we make something called the fundamental attribution error, where we actually put more emphasis on people's internal dispositions more on their external situations. So we tend to focus more on people's personality as opposed to the situation that they're in. Because it's very possible that Jack and Julie aren't so cookie cutter, extrovert and introvert, class clown versus the shy kid. It's very possible that, there's a situation that they're in or that's causing their behavior. So for Jack, the reason that he's a cut up, maybe it's right after lunch and he's full of sugar. Maybe the reason that Julie's so shy is that it's first period and she's still really tired from working, late at night. Maybe Jack is trying to, be funny in class because he's trying to get the attention of the girl that sits next to him. Maybe Julie is shy because all of her friends are in another class period and she's really talkative around them, but she's not so much here. So, we tend to make an error when we focus on people's internal dispositions and we completely forget about their external situations. So you just can't forget about the external situation that they're in. You don't know the environment that is causing them to behave in a certain way. We tend to think about actors in movies. Oh, well, the reason that this person plays a good, bad guy is that they're really dark and twisty inside for real. Not necessarily. They're actors reading, lines that were written for a character. They're just because a person keeps playing a bad guy in a movie or keeps playing, the typical, like surfer guy, or a woman who's always like cold and frigid, doesn't mean that she's going to be like that or he's going to be like that in real life. We typically forget about the external situation of they are actors, and we forget and we tend to focus, the reason that they're having that part is their personality is really close to that, so it's not much of a stretch. Or maybe they're just doing their job. Same thing about teachers. You probably have an idea of the teachers that are outgoing versus the teachers that are not. The teachers that are straight-laced versus the teachers that are just all over the place. But it's very possible that they're also putting on some sort of performance. I mean, you're seeing them at school, at their job. It's very possible that if you run into teachers outside of school, as awkward as that is sometimes, that they're completely different, and you completely forget about the external situation and tend to only focus on the internal disposition. So that's how we explain others. How do we explain others? By making that error, that fundamental attribution error. But when it comes to explaining ourselves, we do just the opposite. When we explain our own behavior, we do the self-serving bias. We're a little bit biased when explaining our own behavior. That makes sense. So if one of your friends is grumpy, maybe not even a friend, maybe an acquaintance. You walk into class and you say hi and they make some sort of like snap at you. You're going to probably think they're rude. You're going to blame their internal disposition, their personality is that they're just not a nice person. But if you were to snap at someone in the same way that they snapped at you, you're going to think to yourself, well, I'm not a rude person. I'm just really tired. I'm just really stressed. So when talking about others, we put all of the weight on their personality and none of the weight on the situation. But when talking about ourselves, we typically put all of the weight on the situation. That's not who I am. I'm just stressed. I'm just tired. I'm just hungry. And then you completely forget about maybe that's just your personality. Maybe instead of, I cut someone off in traffic, oh, that's because I'm late, or I'm running late, or whatever. Maybe it's just because you're a bad driver. Because when people cut you off in traffic, they're not running late, or they don't have a bee in their car. They're a bad driver. But if you do the same thing, oh, you just didn't see them, and I wasn't paying attention. I'm a good driver. Typically, I'm a good driver. Are you? Or are you just in fault of the self-serving bias? Same thing about married couples. If a married couple is happily married, and the husband comes in late and throws his suitcase on the ground and kind of storms off and plops himself on the couch, though a wife might ask, honey, you seem stressed. How was your day at work? You seem like you had a bad day at work. So because she's in a good marriage, she's going to say that there's something wrong here with her husband, but it's because of the situation that he's in. But if she was in a bad marriage and the same thing happened, husband storms in, throws a suitcase on the ground, plops himself in front of the TV, she might think to herself, that's his personality. I made a bad choice. He's not a very good husband. He's not very nice. She might forget that there's a situation here. So the fundamental attribution error, it has a lot to do not only with what we're talking about, but like who we're talking about and how well we know the person. Okay, so does what we think even matter? Because if what we think apparently is not always right, if we tend to forget only the external part, and we only focus on the internal disposition part, do what we think even matter? Yes. So I want you to think of an attitude that you have, not like a attitude, whatever, but more like a belief, an idea that you have, an attitude that you have on, the attitude you have for exercise, or the attitude that you have against cheating, the attitude that you have against or for certain things that people are, for and against. Because attitudes are just beliefs and feelings that predispose our reactions to objects, people, and events. So your attitudes towards politics, religion, diet, family, lots of different things that they are attitudes that we have, feelings that we have that make us react certain ways to certain people and events and so forth and so on. So let's think of an attitude that everyone has. Not everyone. I don't want to, oversimplify things, but an attitude that a lot of people have is that cheating is wrong. Cheating is wrong. And I'm just going to blanket statement cheating is wrong. So do our attitudes guide our actions? If you think cheating is wrong, does that guide your actions? Yes. If several things are in line. Outside influences on what we say and do are minimal. Meaning that there's no pressure to cheat. I didn't say cheating on a person. I didn't say cheating on a test. I didn't say cheating on your taxes. I just said cheating in general. But there's a lot of pressure to cheat on homework, especially if you're in the top 10%, because that rank says a lot of things about you, and a lot of schools will accept you just based on rank alone. So the pressure to have high grades is pretty high. Most of the cheating is done in the top 10% of the class versus the bottom 10% of the class. Bottom 10%, they're not cheating.